Do you think there's an agenda to destroy the traditional family? Whether it's to make men more feminine, to make women more masculine, to encourage empowerment or divorce, whether it's projecting sexuality onto children to ensure that they might become LGBTQ. Do you think there's an agenda to destroy the traditional family? Whether it's to make men more feminine, to make women more masculine, to encourage empowerment or divorce, whether it's projecting sexuality onto children to ensure that they might become LGBTQ so they never have a traditional family, or of course to encourage abortion instead of adoption. There are many ways the traditional family is being attacked. And who's defending it? Tonight on Controlled Opposition, I have a pro-life, pro-family activist, Mattea Merta, on the show, and she's going to be talking about the disturbing policy coming from the United Nations, what she thinks of Poilievre and the Conservative Party of Canada, and what we can do to fight against this madness. The conversation starts now.
I promise you, I will not let you down.
The trucks parked outside illegally should move.
Canada's Conservatives will meet our Paris climate commitment.
Enough with the woke. Sorry, Mr. Speaker, I take that back.
To champion our conservative principles.
We are the party of law and order.
To call in the auditors.
We haven't yet decided whether we're going to call for the government to impose a mandatory test or vaccination.
And we will win the next election. Canada must not ignore the reality of climate change.
Why weren't Canadians vaccinated in January and February like everyone else?
Welcome, everybody, to Controlled Opposition, episode 27. I am Greg Wycliffe, and tonight I am joined by a very, very special guest. She works at the UN to fight against UN policies. She is a pro-life, pro-family activist. It's the one and only Mattea Merta. How are you doing this evening?
I'm wonderful. Thank you. And just for clarification, because I don't want to have 1.5 million of my conservative followers and friends and even family say that you work at the UN. I just work inside the UN to fight the UN. But I don't work for the UN. Just for clarification, so I don't get any angry tweets at me.
Okay. Unfortunately, we had a whole bunch of echo there. We were just doing a sound check for so long, and then it was just like such terrible echo. Let's try that again?
Yeah, for sure. Sound any better?
That sounds much better. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yes.
All I was saying is that, for clarification, I don't work for the UN. I work inside of the UN to fight the UN's agendas. I just don't want a bunch of mean tweets from all my conservative friends and followers saying, like, what the heck, like, you work for them now? So no, I don't work for them, just inside to fight them.
Yeah. And I think at the end of the show, we're going to talk about solutions, and you're going to mention how you actually can fight and lobby the United Nations, even from Canada, and kind of straight to the root of the problem of many policies being pushed here in Canada. So we'll definitely get to that at the end of the show. Definitely want to hear your opinion of Pierre Poilievre and this Conservative Party, and if they're actually going to fight against some of these anti-family many different crazy pieces of policy coming from the United Nations. But first and foremost, I wanted to ask you about the topic of controlled opposition in general and kind of how you came here into politics, because you're really going right into the belly of the beast at the United Nations, lobbying for something pro-family at something like the United Nations. But real briefly, kind of how did you get into politics, and when did you kind of first wise up to the concept of controlled opposition, or people who are kind of claiming to fight for you, but actually not doing that, or kind of weakening the position at the end of the day?
Absolutely. So I actually was kicked out of a private Christian school halfway through my grade 12 year for standing up for my faith. And after that, I realized, like, okay, not everybody is really on my side. And so I delved right into volunteering, got into homeschooling, finished that up, and jumped into a political campaign. A friend of mine was running to be a member of parliament, and so I joined his campaign. He lost, but my MP won. I joined him in an internship for about 2 to 3 months, and then he offered me a job, which landed almost 4 years on Parliament Hill. And whilst I was there, I got exposed. Thank God, I'm so grateful. I was so naive, and I just said yes to every opportunity. That I'm also grateful that I didn't get a poli-sci degree and just went straight from high school to the Hill, because I had a completely open mind. I wasn't taught what to think. My parents taught me how to think. And so I got to see from a completely different perspective than all of my peers, even on the Hill, who had poli-sci degrees. And I just went, okay, like, this is a completely different world than what I had known about politics to really be. I was never interested, by the way, in politics, never considered even going into government. And here I was in this place, and I was just like, okay, like, I feel like there's certain ways that government should work, and I understood the basics after a period of time there. And then I learned there isn't just politics, because politics is the game, and then there's government. Government is the structure of the system, but then there's also party politics. And that's where I started to see a lot of the shenanigans that we had to face in our office. I would say probably the most pushback. And I worked with an incredible member of parliament, Brad Trost from Saskatchewan, and it's from my home province. And he did incredible work and pushed for legislation, and even started the first energy caucus of Canada. And he did all these incredible things, and yet the party targeted him in his nomination campaign, and he ended up losing. And that's when things really started to click for me. And at that point in time, I had been traveling back and forth to Washington, D.C., and I started to get exposed to the American political realm, and I started to see the same things time and time again with the Republican Party, because all this time I'd seen, okay, these are all conservatives. We're all on the same side. But everybody is kind of driven by their own agendas. And so I started to see backroom conversations, even sat in some of the rooms with people who, just said, hey, come and sit in. You're one of us. And come to find out, I wasn't one of them. I wasn't willing to backstab people. And I had my fair share of being backstabbed in both North American capitals of Canada and Ottawa and DC. And I started to see the truth of truly controlled opposition, and how people are really controlled, whether it's by greed, love of money, or it's by their own personal agenda, why they entered politics itself. It's always a different cause, but the generalization is generally the same.
Wow. So you saw it both in the States and in Canada. You saw the same sort of pattern going on there. And it's interesting how you put it, which was they have their own agenda, or they're motivated by greed. Yeah. And I guess sometimes those are one and the same, right? The agenda is to help corporation X potentially, lobby group Y. So that's why we're going to push this legislation because of the lobbyists.
Yeah, so it's usually either fiscal or ideological reasons why politicians push what they push, for the most part. It's not necessarily for the greater good as to what they present it as. They serve as these pieces of legislation on the silver platter, and it's like, I always question things now. Why are you really pushing what you're pushing? I don't care if you're the blue, the red flag. I don't care what side you're on. There's a reason why you're pushing it, and I want to know what it is, the truth of the matter. Yeah.
Notice how moral conviction never really came up there. It's just ideologues. And when it comes to the party going, you didn't say ganging up necessarily, but you essentially alluded to that the party politics is when things really got ugly, and when the party kind of goes after someone who is not playing ball or kind of not aligned with the majority of what the party wants. Can you go into more detail there, possibly with your example of, I believe it was Brad Trost?
Brad Trost, yes.
Trost, sorry.
So he was running for a nomination in his local riding. It's it's a shoe-in conservative riding. So no matter what, conservatives are going to consistently win there. It's the suburbs, and it's the demographics are just conservatives no matter what. And so I was helping him run that campaign, and it was bizarre to see because first we saw Cory Toker, who's now the MP for that riding, him step into play, and we're like, okay, like this is obviously a party setup because Brad was consistent. Like people on the left of center even voted for him because they just knew, like, we disagree with you ideologically and even morally on some issues, but we know what you're going to vote, so that gives us a sense of security. So Brad had this uniqueness to him, and the party didn't like it. And so they sent in Cory Toker, and they sent in one other candidate, Brad Redekop, who ended up becoming the member of parliament for another riding in the Saskatoon area right after that whole shenanigans happened. And they ran these two campaigns against Brad, and they mobilized in very, I can't say too much, but they mobilized specific demographics in favor of these other two candidates to get out to vote. And even on the day when all the nomination was happening, or the voting for nominations was happening, there was just certain inconsistencies. And I'm a person who pays attention to patterns, no matter if it's in my personal or professional life. And I saw these inconsistencies, and I was like,
they got ganged up on, and how they mobilized the demographic against or in favor of another candidate. And I wanted to ask, you said you were recognizing patterns. Was there a specific pattern of like a policy or an idea that Brad was pushing that you don't think the party liked specifically?
Oh, totally. He was very, very pro-life, and he drove that forward. And I think the party really missed out, because if he had been elected again, he would have been critical to the future of the Conservative Party because of the direction we had been discussing behind the scenes, and all the climate agenda that we were discussing as well. And so I think it's a major detriment to the party itself that they actually chose to go up and gang against him. But I believe it was his pro-life stance, not just commenting on it, but actually taking action with regards to the issue.
Yeah, and I think it's a great time to bring up Derek Sloan, because I was doing some research on Derek Sloan recently, and I thought it was very funny because in the recent kind of news cycles over the past 3 to 6 months, being alarming about China has been like, oh my God, Chinese interference, like they're interfering with our politics, like Trudeau's in bed with China, blah, 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 blah. And to be fair, it's obviously something to be concerned about. But do you remember near the beginning of the pandemic when there was a clip that came from Derek Sloan, and he said, hey, what's the deal with Theresa Tam? Is she working for China or something? And he got totally slammed for that. All the other parties were saying, you better kick this guy out of your caucus, blah, 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 for saying this. Derek Sloan was this total villain for asking a question, which like 2 or 3 years later becomes this totally popular thing for the Conservative Party. Now, I want to ask you, because he got ousted from the Conservative Party in a very, 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 very specific way, where all of a sudden, hey, we looked into your donations and some white nationalist neo-Nazi donated to you, and now we're kicking you out of the party. In your opinion, or in your speculation, you don't have to say it definitively or whatever, but do you think that this was an orchestrated?
Yes. Yes. You don't have to finish your sentence. 100%. This is how this is not, and understand, this is not just how the Conservative Party works. This is how many parties work, I actually worked with Derek Sloan. He is a friend. I love him and his family. And yes, this is a total setup because he was a liability, and everybody was calling him the Trump of Canada. He has huge pull within the Conservative Party, and he became another liability, just like Brad Trost. But again, Conservative Party of Canada lost out on a huge player that could have served them very well in the future. But it was time to say bye-bye, and out he went.
Well, right. And you say that these people, these, like strong social conservatives could have really helped the Conservative Party. But, that's not, the Conservative Party doesn't want that. Right? Like they don't want to be a social, like they're terrified of being anything at all socially conservative.
To that, I have to say, I disagree. The establishment, the elites of the party don't want it. But the
Right.
base itself, which is the party, I don't care if there's a structure in place and they call themselves the CPC because they work in CPC HQ. Conservative Party of Canada, where does their fund, where does their donations come in from? It comes from Canadians themselves, the Conservatives of Canada. That's the Conservative Party. Look at the policies that were just passed. Yeah, I was pretty disappointed there's no new policy on abortion passed this past convention. But there was tons of policies passed with regards to protecting women, even going down to the basic definition of clarification of what a woman is, which is an adult female, as well as protecting single-sex spaces. And so the base itself is socially conservative. And that one policy that I believe there was a coach from Alberta who proposed it, and then it was pushed through, 86% of the party voted in favor of it, a socially conservative policy. And time and time again, all these socially conservative policies get through at the conventions because the party itself, the people are conservative. But the establishment and the leader of their party, they see it as a liability. I see it also as social conservative policies are vital because if you don't have them at this point in time, there's not a ton of differentiation between other parties in Canada. We have the Liberals, the NDPs, Bloc Québécois, they're there. And then you have, in the House anyway, you have the Green Party, good old Green Party, sticking it out, and then you have the Conservatives. So where does the CPC really differentiate? Yeah, there's some fiscal policy. Green policy or climate policy, it's the exact, in my opinion, they're going down the exact same route as the other parties because they have the UN Sustainable Development Goals as their pointer, their indicator, their target, and their end goal of their climate policies. Okay, so what differentiates? Social policy. So the sooner that the CPC wakes up and realizes that this is winning, especially because the demographics of Canada now have changed so drastically with immigration, they need to wake up. And when they do, I think we'll start to see a whole lot more in the GTA and out east, sorry, I'm from the west, eastern parts of Canada start to shift in the Conservative favor. But they have to actually take a stand.
So this is very interesting. You have the establishment elites of the party who are saying, someone like Derek Sloan, someone who is pro-life, is a liability. So they orchestrate a way to try and get them out of the party. But you're saying, the party is still conservative because they vote for these policies. But at the same time, do these establishment elites not also say, okay, well, although we passed this policy, we're not actually going to run on it, and we're not actually going to push it through a parliament if we were to get into power? Do they not have the power at the end of the day to actually push forth the policy, to actually make the change in the country?
The politicians themselves do, absolutely. But when you look at the party's policies, to my understanding, from what I've been told and read on, is that they're not necessarily binding. Ooh.
Oh, whoops. That's very funny. If you guys are watching, what is going on there? There we go. Fixed. But so yeah, the politicians themselves obviously have voting power, but I guess like I'm hearing kind of two different things right now, where it's like, yes, the actual base of the party is conservative, but it's the establishment elites who kind of have the power to kick out people who are social conservative. Like that's an alarming problem.
Yes.
Right.
And I think that the party itself, being the people, need to start talking about this and normalizing this conversation more so. And that's why I'm glad we're talking about it now, because when I have been at policy conventions in the past, it's frustrated me because everybody sees it. Everybody knows about it, but nobody really talks about it out in the open. And that's why the best disinfectant is light. So you have to bring it to light. And if you want to see change, you have to actually speak about it. Maybe you're the first one in your constituency that actually brings it up with your community board. People have to normalize this conversation in order for it to be dealt with at the top. And that's what the people at the top don't want happening. They don't want people talking about this because like their shenanigans is already out there. Everybody already knows what they're doing, but we have to actually be the ones to stick it to them and be saying, hey, we know what you're doing and we're going to hold you accountable every single policy convention voting you in or voting you out.
Well, it would be nice if we could do the inverse of, instead of kicking out the social conservatives, like, hey, we're going to kick out the gatekeepers, if you will, or the establishment elite, if you will. Hey, we actually, hey, the way that you're kind of policing social conservatives and kicking them out of the party, yeah, we want to kick you out of the party, actually. I don't know why this keeps happening. I'm so sorry. But you know what I mean? Like, wouldn't it be nice to actually just kick out these, these gatekeepers, if you will?
I'm sorry, this is hilarious. Yes, I totally agree with you. It's very hard to be serious at this point in time. Yes, I do agree.
Come on, what's going on here? Let me get rid of that.
We went from a Picasso to a very interesting 1920s, somebody was on weed kind of painting. There we go. Back to normal.
There we go. Back to normal. Back to normal. Where were we? The
CPC Gatekeepers.
Yes, the CPC Gatekeepers. Are they politicians themselves? Like, is somebody like Polyev, is he the gatekeeper? Who are the movers and shakers? Are they, you don't have to name names if you're not allowed to, but are they actual politicians? Are they conservative senators? Or oh my God, we are having such a time with this. This is crazy.
Would it help to restart the feed?
Possibly, yeah. I don't know how we would do that though.
Okay.
Why is that going on? It looks fine over here. Sorry about this, everybody. Having some technical difficulties here. Jeez. There we go.
Perfect.
There we go. I think I found the easy fix there. Sorry about that.
Oh, good.
Yeah, because this is a very interesting conversation, because we're into the conversation of party politics is really the big problem, and it's not necessarily the base of the party, the people who contribute. It's not even necessarily some of the MPs, but when it comes to the establishment that you referred to, that there are these kind of movers and shakers who have the power in the party. Do we know who they are? Why do they have so much power? Does it come down to voting power within the party, or is it something more nefarious than that?
Honestly, when you understand the political game and you understand what people are doing behind the scenes, somebody like Hamish Marshall, for example, good political strategist, I'd actually say a very good political strategist. But when you look at what he's actually doing, and it's not just him, there's many people at CPCHQ, and then there's the people who inform the people at CPCHQ what they should and shouldn't do. So really, there just has to be an amplification of the grassroots voices for anything to change.
There has to be
it's not amplification of the grassroots voices.
Sorry, we just had a really bad echo there. It's about the application of the grassroots voices.
Amplification of the grassroots voices.
Oh my gosh, this echo is so bad, guys. This is and let's talk about success stories of that happening. Would you say this was a success at this recent policy convention or this national convention of the Conservative Party, where they were able to push this through? Was this a big win? Because we're going to talk about in a moment how it kind of translates to maybe they passed some policies, but is Polyev actually going to talk about it to journalists and in the House of Commons? Or is it just going to kind of be this feeling like we won at the convention, but nothing really happens. Nothing really happens in terms of post-convention or even in the more public conversation, when we're front-facing journalists.
Yeah, so that's a sticky situation. I think it was a win for the party internally, but the issue comes when we have to actually talk about these things outside of convention time. So we have to drive it. We, being the grassroots, have to drive these subjects, these issues forward on a consistent basis, not just at policy conventions, because that's a hoorah. We're all conservatives in the room. Great, let's pat each other on the back. We did great in voting on a conservative policy. That's wonderful. But then we have to drive it forward and shift culture in that direction, because the politicians are going to follow what they see as beneficial in the culture. And if they start seeing conservatives popping up, whether figureheads or the mom and pop are writing in their local newspapers, tweeting out online, and they're normalizing the conversation of being conservative and taking a stand, then politicians like Pierre Poilievre are going to take that stronger stance in front of the cameras and to journalists. Now, it also takes us as the grassroots reaching out to our politicians and saying, hey, I would like to encourage Pierre, through you, to take a stand for X, Y, and Z. Because every single federal office, I worked in one, they all categorize what people write into them for. And then sometimes they'll even pass on the communication to whoever else's office. If you say to Pierre Poilievre from Mattea Merta, directing through whoever my MP is, this is my message against gender theory, please take a stand for it or against it. They send that off to Pierre's office. So the more communication they get, the better it is for our cause within the party. But we have to be more consistent in speaking against certain issues and bringing solutions forward in public square in order for politicians like Pierre to actually have the balls to stand in front of a camera and say, hey, we're against gender transition of children, and leave it at that. And you don't have to give all these justifications. That's one thing I wish politicians would stop doing, especially on the conservative side. Just give your answer, and you don't have to justify everything to media.
Well, yeah, and it feels like most of the time they're defending themselves. They're on the back foot. They're always on the defensive. They're honestly never on the offensive. You know, and while we're on that topic, we have, despite this, like the beginning of the resistance of conservatives actually standing up and saying, "Hey, parental rights for children," they're both Doug Ford and Pierre Poilievre essentially taking the stance like that parents should have the right if their kid is going to like transition as a kid, like they should know, which is not a win. But
it's not a win. It's so frustrating to see.
Yeah, and they're, while that's happening, you have the establishment, like, liberal leftist media essentially once again going on the attack. I'll bring this up quickly. This is Kathleen Wynne saying, listen to the children. Stephen Lecce's stance on gender identity in schools is a recipe for more homeless youth. More homeless youth. If kids can't like keep their gender identity secret from their parents, they're going to be homeless on the, like, it's crazy how aggressively the left pushes and continues to push. I'll bring up that other article that you tweeted out recently about what is it? What is there? Was the Toronto Star one? You know what I'm talking about.
Oh my gosh. Yes. It is a privilege, not a right, to know your child's gender identity.
Exactly. Like we're being told, and like all these like big conservative party fans are like, yeah, they're fighting for us. And it's like, are they? Like I think we just actually lost ground there. Whereas we're afraid that we're going to be called like, transphobe. Why aren't we calling them pedophiles? Why aren't we calling them creeps? Why aren't we like actually fighting back with this type of like communication style that's more aggressive? Maybe do you think that sounds aggressive? Personally, I think I would love to hear anybody kind of coming out and being more aggressive like that. But what are your thoughts on this?
Oh, no, I don't think it's too aggressive. I literally tweeted out that they are creeps today. So it is the conservative psyche for everybody to be, okay, everything in its place, everybody's proper and kind. And the time for that's, I don't want to say it's over, but it's time for refinement. It's time for a new strategy. And us as conservatives are creative, but we need to tap into that creativity a little bit more in our communication. Mm-hmm. I really, really Am I gone? Again?
I think you're back. You said
There we go.
You were saying
Yeah, so I just put out today.
Yep.
Yeah, so just today I put out there that we should bring back public shaming of people who are going after people who like Kathleen Wynne, saying we should listen to the children.
Sorry, there's just a really bad echo right now. I don't know what the heck's going on, man. They but sorry, continue. Hopefully we're going to be back in a second here. I'm hoping Mattea will be back in a second here. Ah, man. Come on. Come back. Please come back. Am I alone here still, or what's going on? Are we frozen? Yeah, someone's sure afraid of our message tonight. Yeah, no kidding, eh? I'd switch to Odyssey or Rumble. I don't think that's the issue. Oh my God, we're back. Can you hear me? Yeah, someone was saying in chat they really don't want the message to get out tonight, apparently.
Oh my gosh, this is so funny. Hey, we roll with the punches, right?
Yeah, we're gonna get through this. So you were just saying. What were you just saying? You were just saying that we should bring public shaming back.
Yeah, because like someone like Kathleen Wynne saying we should listen to children. How if you actually just it doesn't even take a really brilliant intellectual person to go, why would we listen to children? Children do some of the most stupid things. We as adults are the ones who shape them for them and guide them down a path so that they don't kill themselves. Like, children want to do some very ridiculous things, and if we just listen to them, it's bad enough that people are listening to them and these children are being chopped up and mutilated. What else should we listen to them about? It's a really, really bad message.
Yeah, I wanted to be a Ninja Turtle when I was a kid. If I was told I could actually be a Ninja Turtle, I would be like, really? Like, let's do it. And it's so crazy how far we've come in this country, because it's almost like the first instinct to conservatives is like, yeah, well, isn't it extremist to say that? It's like, no, not at all. It's totally normal to say that. How far we've gone to kind of accepting this sort of like corrupt moral paradigm. And maybe we'll get into that, which is, people are afraid of embracing something like Christianity or religion to kind of like help us in this kind of political battle. But to that, I say we are getting crushed right now by this woke religion. It operates like a woke religion. It, if you don't worship trans people, if you don't worship BIPOCs, if you don't worship indigenous people, if you don't if you don't confess your white guilt, you are a sinner. You are a bad person. Like this has the same moral weight that any religion does. And it is like the most popular ideology being pushed, not just in Canada, but on Netflix and America, all over the place. Like, we are being overwhelmed by this corrupt moral authority that acts a lot like a religion. And I feel like if we go back to our roots, which are very Christian or French Catholic or Protestant, whatever, there is a moral authority that's already there that really dictates a lot of what conservatism is, or used to be, or at least what we want to go back to. Why do you think people are afraid of embracing Christianity, or to help in this spiritual or political fight?
I don't think necessarily that people. Oh, there's a lot of echo. I can hear it. You're better now. There we go.
These in a while. Can you hear me?
I hope you can hear me, because I can't hear you.
You can't hear me?
No.
Hello?
Dang, they're really trying everything today. There we go. I can hear it now. There we go.
Is that better? Okay.
That's so much better.
Can you maybe turn the volume down in your earphones?
I can't do that. Sorry.
Okay. All right. Where were we? I asked you about why do you think conservatives are afraid to be, embrace Christianity or embrace religion, to kind of, wield it as a sword in debates, or kind of for arguing what we believe in, arguing for our values, like being pro-family, for example.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think that. I don't think people are necessarily scared personally, but they're externally of what could happen if they speak out about their faith. Now, saying that, I think people have just seen how much opposition there is. But whenever I see opposition, I think this is the point conservatives need to start taking, and I've seen it in the younger generations, which is incredibly encouraging. And it's going to start strengthening the older generations, is that as you take a stand, a moral stand, especially if you're a Christian, you're going to have pushback, but don't take that pushback as a negative, take it as a positive. It's like when you have an anger issue, you learn to redirect that anger in a way that's productive and actually serves you. When you're faced with opposition, you have the opportunity to either let it defeat you or build you up. And so I think Christians and conservatives alike need to actually take a stand. And there's this common ground that if I speak out, what's going to happen? I might lose some communication with my friends and family. I've lost some friends and others very near and dear to me because of where I stand on issues now. But I've gained so many more people. And it's actually helped me get into places and spaces that otherwise I don't think, actually, no, I never would have gotten to. I also know that that's because of my relationship with Jesus, that's happened, because I followed him when he told me to do certain things and say certain things and be certain places. But it's also because I chose to speak. I chose to be a willing vessel to be used. And so I would encourage anyone and everyone to also do the same thing. Don't be scared. The fear doesn't serve you in any profitable way. And this life is so short. Why keep what you truly believe hidden? You have a sphere of influence and I have a sphere of influence totally separate from one another. Let's serve our spheres of influence to the best of our abilities. Because the one thing that is serving as an absolute detriment to the conservative and even faith denominations at large is when we stay silent. Because then nobody learns from one another. Nobody gets that other perspective. And so we're actually harming our neighbors, our friends, and our family.
We actually are harming our members and our family. Are you there? Oh, I don't know. I can't hear you right now. Hello. Oh man, this has just been so much fun.
Hello?
Oh, there you go. You're back.
What in the world is going on? Well, there we go. At least we got most of that one out.
You were saying?
Don't harm your friends and families and your neighbors. Utilize your sphere of influence and speak what you actually believe. That's going to deal with your fear. And any person that you see get to a place of prominence or influence, they've had to win little internal battles. And I want every single person to get to a place of absolute influence and absolute prestige in their own spheres. How do you do that? You have to deal with little internal battles, and fear is one of the first things you have to fight. And you can conquer it. And the sooner you conquer it, the better it is for you and everyone else around you.
Yeah. And you're making me think a lot about fear, because I feel like a lot of the conservative movement is overwhelmed with fear of what the media is going to say, fear of what their friends or family might say, fear, like so much fear. And we almost have accepted that fear, and that we have to live with that fear and not act in spite of the fear, but actually like respond to the fear and validate the fear. And I think that's a huge part of why we're losing so much, is because we are afraid of what someone might call us. We're not acting despite fear. We are reacting to the fear of getting called names. Meanwhile, far leftists, they're not afraid of conservatives at all. They'll say, F off, fascist, I'm going to punch you in the street. If you disagree with my ideas, then I don't know, I'm going to try to ruin your life. That they are fearless. And I mean, that, to their credit, they do have the establishment, unfortunately, on their side. They have this huge beast machine on their side. But the point is that if we give into that intimidation, then we've already lost, right?
Absolutely. And one point on that, I thank you for bringing that up, because a major downfall within conservative movements in general, and I saw this immensely when I was in the when I was in the pro-life caucus on the Hill, is that I saw all these different pro-life groups. Yeah, one was in favor of a 6-week abortion ban. One was in favor of an all-out ban. Then we had the euthanasia groups in there, and anti-euthanasia groups, that is. And there wasn't a whole lot of unity. There was unity, yes, but there's always these points of contention. And within the leftist movements, everybody's unified. So within the conservative movements, I don't care if that's something that I seek to do on a consistent daily basis, regardless of what realm I'm in, whether it's on national security, immigration, or with pro-life groups. If you can find that one point in which you all agree upon, then run together. You're each other's brothers and sisters. You found your tribe, especially after COVID. We've all kind of found our tribes. Run hard with them, and then seek out and find those bridges where you can reach out into other tribes, other communities, find that common cause, and then run together. There's always a point of unification. And regardless on the provincial, federal, or local levels, you have to find a point in time where you're just, okay, we're going to get defeated if we're divided. But running together, unified, is going to just deliver the best results for all of us. So we have to all come together. Otherwise, we will continually get defeated.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you about, I think that's a really, really good point. And, being conservative, people can be more libertarian minded. Like, I have my rights, I have my freedoms, I am an individual, I'm going to think and say what I want. You can't tell me what to do. And that does end up being a detriment sometimes when it comes to kind of being more effective in the political arena. It's like, okay, guys, we need to all move in the same direction for a minute here. We can't just all have all our own ideas. We should focus on this one because we all agree on this one, right, guys? So I totally agree with that. There's another kind of in the same vein of like criticizing the right wing of what they're not doing very well. There's this sort of obsession with like winning over far leftists who will never vote for us. Have you noticed this? There's this like, oh, we need to appeal to, transgender people, or we need to appeal to, the homosexual community. And it's like, do we? Is that really all that's holding us back?
No, literally, like I said, with Brad Trost, homosexuals voted for him. Individuals who were very far left in other policies, fiscal or social or otherwise, voted for Brad Trost because they knew that he was a morally strong man who would consistently take a stand.
Did he have to wear heels or wear lipstick in order to get these gay people to vote for them? No,
absolutely
right?
Not. No, the polar opposite. You look at what he spoke. His words are out there on the online, and the pandering has to stop because it's weakening the fiber of the conservative movement at large. If we're not willing to conserve the most basic things in life, like what a woman is, or what marriage is, the very definition of marriage itself. If we're not willing to protect and conserve these things, then what do you have to say for calling yourself a conservative?
If you're not willing to say that again, if you're not willing to protect,
if you're not willing to protect, if you're not willing to protect and conserve the most basic fundamentals, then what are you doing? What are you doing calling yourself a conservative?
I really wish there wasn't these technical difficulties right now, because what you're saying is so beautiful. And we're getting an echo. It's so annoying. Oh my God. If you're not willing to protect the fundamental values of what makes you conservative, then what are you even doing?
Exactly.
And I want to drive into a specific point here, which is there is a very strong pro-choice consciousness in Canada. You know, when it's like, hey guys, we're not, like, there's this kind of sentiment that you've probably seen, which is like, we're not even going to talk about that. It's been decided. Okay. Why do you believe it's so strong here in Canada? And have you had success on trying to crack the code of that, or like making any leeway or progress there?
Good question. It's a very good question. I have had a lot of success, actually. I have been able to talk with feminist groups, young and old, even talking with Member of Parliament Kathy Wagenthal when she had put it out. I believe this is a sex-selective abortion bill last year, a year or two ago for sure. And she also had experienced the same thing as I have consistently. And that's when you talk with feminist groups, you find, again, that's that common bridge with people. You find the common bridge and you go, oh, you're against sex-selective abortion, something we agree on. Let's run together. It's an untapped community. Feminists, I consider becoming a feminist at one point. I'm totally anti-feminist now. But I understand the way they think and the way that they present themselves. And so I understand that there are ways in which we can reach into different communities, whether it's other faith denominations, or it doesn't matter. There's always a way for you to reach into another community and to just speak what you really believe, find the common ground, link arms, and then run. There's always a way. And so I have had a lot of success. Even more so in Canada than the United States, because the United States is so polarized now on this issue. But I believe in Canada, because of the media being so, it's government funded media, so they're going to tout this line, and then everybody seems to run with the same talking points, and it's been so long that people don't even understand that when the Supreme Court struck down the previous abortion law in Canada, they actually left it up to members of Parliament to create a new law. Majority of Canadians don't know that. Everybody in Canada seems to know about Roe versus Wade, but who in Canada is actually teaching about Canadian history on the issue? So once people actually hear, oh, okay, I'm a leftist and I didn't know that about our history. They go look it up, see it's true, and then they start lobbying the government in favor of an abortion, some sort of abortion legislation. Whether I agree with their stance on the legislation itself, I don't care. The fact that they're knowledgeable and they're willing to actually advocate for some sort of legislation on the issue is a win for me, enough of a win for me. And then it's about building relationships from there on. So I've seen success. And I think now with the rise of independent media, as well as the dismantling of the establishment media, I think we're going to start seeing these cracks spread even wider.
Yeah. No, it's very exciting. It is very exciting. And let's begin to wrap it up here. I want to ask you about the United Nations, your experience there, how people can get involved to lobby at the United Nations. But before that, real quickly, I really don't trust this Conservative Party. I really don't trust Pierre Poilievre. And kind of the whole, message of the show is you can actually be much more effective in pushing conservative ideas by supporting people outside of the Conservative Party, like Billboard Chris, for example, like Josh Alexander, by supporting these people and really getting behind them and actually like grilling the Conservative Party for not supporting these people. That's actually what moves the ball down the field more effectively to kind of put the pressure on the Conservative Party to actually act. Would you agree with that?
I totally agree. That's what the left side does. They use all of these influencers, and the conservatives, they never use them. In America, look how successful it has been to prop up conservative influencers. I don't care if I care to a certain extent, but I also don't care if they are if they're label themselves as gay, as feminist. I know pro-life feminists, and they have a huge part to play in the demographic of America. I think there's also an untapped section of that in Canada that could be utilized for the Conservative Party. But they do need to get behind specific people. I after working within the Conservative Party with a member of Parliament, I don't trust anybody. I don't trust anybody who is a politician. Many of them are my friends, and they know that I don't trust them fully. But I specifically do not trust political parties. Never trust a political party. Work with a politician. But when it comes to Pierre, Man, like him talking all about parental rights and supporting the rights of parents. At this last convention, I was literally right now like clenching my fists. It angered me to a certain extent because he voted in favor of Bill C4 last year, the conversion therapy ban. What does that do to parents if they want to not have their child mutilated or going and receiving hormone therapy, hormone injections? Those parents would be fined and or jailed, thrown in prison for up to 5 years. So we can't forget the past. We have to hold these politicians to account. And that was even during his time as leader of the Conservative Party. So the hypocrisy is rank. But you know what? If he gets elected as prime minister, I hope the people of Canada hold him to account.
And well, something's going to have to happen with that. At the very, hey, you voted for C4. Are you going to admit you made a mistake, or are you going to keep speaking out both sides of your mouth? Exactly. And it's just to kind of play devil's advocate here, because you're being hopeful about, hey, well, there's still the conservative base in the Conservative Party of Canada. To be devil's advocate, what if this mass of people who are truly conservative are just being duped and strung along and being told, no, we're going to be conservative. We voted in C4 and we're probably not going to push any actual policy that actually improves the situation. But we're going to keep owning Trudeau on social media and feeding you little breadcrumbs about how we're going to save the nation. But when it comes to the actual laws that are passed in this country, we're not going to do shit. But make sure you donate. Give us your email and credit card information.
Yeah, the way everything boils down to money. Everything in the world. That's how this world goes around. That's how the party survives. So the moment that they start acting, like right now, you could literally say, I am pulling my CPC donations, whether it's on an annual or a monthly or whatever basis, because Pierre Poilievre is refusing to make an apology for his stance on voting in favor of Bill C4.
Nice.
If 10 people from every single Conservative constituency did that, even more so non-Conservative constituencies did that, the pain would be felt back in Ottawa. And Pierre would be forced, at least he would have to think about it very thoroughly, his future actions. So there's always a way people can take action on this. And I would even encourage people to speak out online in favor of it, because the one thing that all these politicians hate is when people voice their opinions online, because then the world can see it. It's not just the people in their home coming over for dinner, hearing about how they don't like Pierre Poilievre and his one decision he made on Bill C4. Or his stance on abortion.
That's so funny. That's in a nutshell. These politicians hate democracy. They hate when people voice their opinions publicly. I hate when they share their opinion. God, so annoying when they have that free speech thing. God, it's so annoying. But what would you say before getting to the UN, or maybe relating it to the UN and how you're making a difference, or how people can make a difference there? How can we best apply pain? How can we make it feel painful for these politicians? Did you say like is it simply emailing them, or
there's quite a few things you can actually do? And I love when people actually ask for an action item, because that's one thing we fail to do. We complain about things and then we don't do anything. So obviously, one way is communicating online, putting tweets out, putting out content, holding people to account that way. But that is not enough. That is not enough. You have to take subsequent action. So I would say calling and emailing your MP on a regular basis. Keep yourself up to date. Do your due diligence with research. That's how you start shifting things. Because politicians, as someone who worked in the office and sat down with constituents and lobbyists on a consistent basis, you sit down and you know when somebody understands what they're talking about, or you know when there's passion driving them. So on top of that, go and sit with your member of parliament, book a meeting with him or her. Go and book a meeting. Everything based out of relationship goes farther than a simple email or a tweet does. So show your face, make yourself appear really human, literally sitting right in front of them, because it's more difficult for a person to say no to someone when they're sitting right in front of them. So I would encourage you also write in letters to the editor. Those things are still a real thing, and they influence a certain demographic of our societies that otherwise maybe aren't online or can't necessarily go and pick up an actual paper because they're too old. Like, there's always a way. And if you are a good writer, or if you're good in front of a camera, utilize the giftings that you have. God gave you certain giftings for a reason. Utilize them for good. So start a podcast. Do what you're doing.
Fix the audio, though.
Fix it.
Make sure you fix the audio and get rid of the technical difficulties.
Next time we'll have great audio. But
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's always a way.
Yeah, thanks. We're about to wrap it up here, but tell us specifically about the UN as well, and how I know that you're doing a lot there, and I mean, we'll have to do another episode because there's much more to talk about. But is there things that are simple to do if I'm a Canadian citizen and I want to, complain to the UN about something?
Absolutely. 100%. Yes. So primarily what I do, we'll have to do another episode, but primarily what I do is combat their anti-life, anti-family, and anti-national sovereignty agendas. So there's 3 primary categories that I'm involved in. And so with regards, if you are passionate about the pro-life issue, the UN is constantly attacking it. So you can look into, I would give you UNICEF or UNFPA, the United Nations Population Fund. You look at basics of what they're doing, and then you contact your Canadian mission to the UN. You literally plug that into your search engine, Canadian mission to the UN, and it'll pop up and there will be a contact button. Contact them and say, I'm a pro-life Canadian and I want you to stand for the pro-life position. It's very, very basic, very simple. Just like you would lobby your federal or provincial politicians, you lobby the UN. Yeah, they're a bunch of appointed bureaucrats, but nobody really does this. And this is every single time I get the opportunity to tell people, lobby the UN, because nobody else does it. The other voices there are philanthropist groups or groups like Planned Parenthood International, Marie Stopes International, very pro-abortion, anti-family groups. So they have a big say at the table. But if there's a lot of communications coming in from actual citizens of the nation, those concerns, those questions are going to be sent to Capital. They're going to be sent back to Ottawa and say, hey, there's a lot of pro-life Canadians reaching out to us here at the UN. What do we do? So you can apply pressure at the UN that way, and then it gets back to your Capital, and it shows how strong of a voice we, the pro-life or conservative bloc, actually has in the nation.
Yeah. Okay. I'm liking this conversation, and I'm looking forward to our next one, because it's, you're really tapping into, with experience, this is really what makes politicians hurt. This is really what makes them move. And that's exciting to me, because I do want to know kind of what actually moves the needle, what actually gets these people to act. But thank you so much for your time, Mattea Merta. I am so sorry for the technical difficulties. Big shout outs to everybody watching us live right now. You guys are the real, true fans who are listening through this echoey mess with all sorts of Picasso paintings and such. But before we get going here, is there anything else you want to share on what we've been talking about, or anything you want to promote?
Well, I actually am starting a podcast, the Mattea Merta podcast. It's going to be going live. Really excited about that one, because it's oftentimes, like I said, we're in this talking point society, and I want to just get information out there to help people. So the Mattea Merta podcast will be live, and truly, if everyone just lived by conviction instead of this set of societal rules, we'll be in a better place. And as soon as we start implementing that individually, we start to change societies.
Amazing. And so that podcast will just be the name, your name, Mattea Merta, the Mattea Merta podcast.
I actually just linked it right there on Spotify. Twitter, so everybody on Twitter, everybody on Twitter, everybody else on any other platforms.
Well, so the Spotify link is right here. Make sure you get a audio technician for your podcast, because you might need it. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Thank you so much, Mattea Merta. There is her @ on Twitter as well. Again, Mattea Merta. Thank you so much for watching, and I'm really excited to revisit aspects of this conversation and learn more with you. And I'm sure we'll chat again soon. Thanks again for watching. And it is okay to demand higher standards. Thank you, guys.